O machine of the waking dream, how is it you learn through death and tears and many years of bile and flesh and bone? O machine of the waking dream, how is it you learn through time and gears and quiet fears of never going home?
Welcome, everybody. This is FIVARS 2024, the 10th anniversary of the Festival of International Virtual and Augmented Reality Stories. Today, I am joined by Rowan, who is also a performer and VR designer, let's say, someone who designs personas and their likenesses and is a very prolific performer and world builder. And we're going to have a bit of a look at the process behind this year's work, Liminal, which is featuring at the festival. Welcome to the show, Rowan.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your history that led you to this role in VR. What got you started in this digital medium?
Well, it was kind of a long road getting here. I originally started as training up as a classical animator. When I was a very young child, I think I was in grade 2, when I figured out I wanted to animate for Disney and such. And I trained up in classical animation and traditional arts until actually I got out of college, which was about 2004. And at that time, in the animation industry, Disney laid off, just as I was getting out of school, they laid off about, 30,000 of their animators or something like that? It was a ridiculous number. And so that the bottom sort of fell out of that industry because everyone was shifting to 3D. And I had no 3D training whatsoever. So I had to switch gears. And that fell into game design, which video games were always something I was interested in. And I began my game development career actually in doing game jams and doing Ludum Dares and things like that, and ended up on Second Life. And I began developing on Second Life, and that was really my first sort of self-training foray into 3D and getting into that mode of development. And I ran a successful business on Second Life for about 15 years. And then I got a DK1 as a gift from my brother. And he'd always known I was interested in the metaverse, and I would always participated in the metaverse through MUDs and mucks and text-based environments at first, and then I moved over to MMOs, and then Second Life, and into VR. I got my DK1 and sort of started development on that. I got a grant from the Canadian Media Fund back in 2014, 2015, in which I developed a prototype, which is related to Liminal, not directly Liminal itself, but related to it. Developed that prototype, and then I got more into social VR during that time, and I finally sort of stumbled my way into Neos, which was the precursor of this application called Resonite. And once we sort of went over to Resonite, which is where I presently am, and I'm presently manifest in this avatar, that this is where I developed Liminal. I got another grant from the Canadian Council for the Arts to develop Liminal. What was it, 2022, 23? And yeah, the rest is me just developing this for the last while and now performing it.
Thanks. So there's a lot there to unpack.
Yes.
It's one of those things where, to me, that journey seems perfectly logical. I love that you came through Second Life. That was a whole stage of life for a lot of people. And yet they may not be familiar with some of the terminology. So, for example, these Canadian grant agencies are one thing. In Canada, grants are what people do. They write grants morning until night, and
Yes.
they define the art of grant writing. But it's an incredible thing to be able to have, because it's allowed experimental work to develop and flourish, and it doesn't always have to be concerned with a free market economy.
Yes, for sure.
And I think that's why a lot of major innovations have emerged out of Canada. I've said this before, but you see things like Geoffrey Hinton and AI, and Steve Mann and wearable technology, and IMAX and Christie projectors, and Houdini and Maya software, all coming out of these territories. And another thing you've mentioned was Resonite. So let's talk about what Resonite is.
Of course. Well, Resonite is the brainchild of a singular person actually named Frooks, and he's the main individual who sort of came up with this and propagated this. They formed a company since called the Yellow Dog Man Company, and they are the developers of this platform. And what Resonite is, in essence, is it is a VR program like VR Chat, where you can go in and you can socialize and you can visit worlds, but it's also an application in which you can build things and you can build worlds. And everything is contained in the platform. So not only can you visit and explore, you can also create. And that is the pivotal crux of the difference between a platform like VR Chat, where it's mostly socializing, and you can develop for VR Chat, and there are experiences for VR Chat that people have created, but it's all outside of VR Chat. It's all external. Whereas Resonite, it's all internal. And you develop, it is a game engine.
That is a really interesting distinction. Yeah, I've seen folks develop performances in alt space and in Mozilla hubs, and it's a lot of extra work to get the interactivity and the affordances and the set pieces and shaders and all of these other things that really work together to create a powerful experience. I think another thing that's a distinction is some things are based in web, like Mozilla hubs, and some things are based as standalone proprietary apps that you have to download. And sometimes that could be a bit of a hurdle, because it's hard to get people's attention anyway. It's the second thing to have to get them to download these big clients and then figure out how to set it all up. So
Yes.
I'm sure that a big part of the job is reducing friction so that you can get people who really don't know to get in there to actually experience this world. So how have you, we'll go back to this authoring platform, because it is pretty amazing what Resonite has become.
Very incredible, yes.
Let's talk about a little bit how you remove that friction and what is involved for a person to come and see you perform.
Admittedly, the onboarding has been probably the largest challenge of anything in this project, or in any project that involves an online platform that is live and has people from outside VR coming in. And it's something that we're continuously talking about and continuously discussing, because it is such a challenge, and it's something that has sort of plagued us for years, where we try to work tangentially with each other and other performances to figure out what is exactly the best way of doing this. I know I've worked with Jason Moore, who is the director of Pitch Perfect and all of that, and he runs something called the Meta Movie. And it's a live performance that you participate in actively. You're one of the performers in this play that they perform, and their onboarding process is quite streamlined. He has a video that other performances often use as a general introduction to Resonite. I know that fellow Canadian artist Nanotopia, Tosca Tran, she does work with fungi in VR, and her onboarding process has been challenging because she integrates things like the Muse, which is a device that reads EEG readings. You strap it to your forehead and it reads your brainwaves. So she's had to integrate that into her onboarding as well. We try to have sort of instruction manuals that are shared Google documents or shared videos. And of course, with Liminal, there is, on top of that, a custom onboarding tutorial once you get into the world to familiarize yourself with the specific world that you're in. So not only do you have to have onboarding for Resonite, you have to have onboarding for the actual experience that you're having, which varies depending on the experience. With Liminal, it's a narrative beat where it gives a little bit of the story, and it gives, a little bit of, very simple sort of interactions that familiarize yourself with the world, but it's mostly, sort of cobbling together and collaborating with other artists and with Resonite developers themselves to try to get people in and make the experience as easy as possible for people who've never been in VR before.
You're a pioneer, because there will be a time when these tools are far more prevalent and it'll be just a daily thing for folks. And in the current stage, I think what we have to clarify with your work is that it's more than just machinima, right? Machinima was when people would use an existing game engine, a combat system, and then one would play one character and the other would another. They'd add voice after. But I understand that the avatar that you use in this took 8 months to develop. So let's talk about the complexity of the avatars and how you built them, what was involved, what the layers are.
Of course. I don't really want to show you the avatar here, because it is a large part of the performance seeing the avatar for the first time. It is a centerpiece of the performance, and the genuine reactions I get from people from the avatar is a delight for me. It's a delight for the audience, and it is an integral part of the piece, reacting to the Wanderer and seeing him for the first time. But that's not to say that I don't have an example. I am currently wearing another avatar that I developed. This embodiment is named Styx, and he is a satyr, and I can actually dynamically zoom out and show you what the entire body sort of looks like here. And I developed this avatar myself. This also took several months to complete, and I did everything on this. Oh, you can see I'm in the liminal space right now. I developed everything about this avatar, from sculpting to rigging to materials to all of the blend shapes and facial expressions, all of the hooking up of systems, everything, the clothes, sculpted from scratch. It's all done from scratch completely.
So yeah, that's amazing, and I know you probably don't want to give up a lot of your secret sauce, but talk us a little bit through the workflow of developing an avatar for Resonite, and is it the same as would be for a different platform, or are there things that are proprietary or unique about it, or maybe even more advanced?
Well, it's funny you should say that because developing a 3D model for VR and for social VR is very, very different than developing a 3D model for, say, an animated film or even a render or just like a still image. Because you have to remember that when you're in VR, you are rendering everything twice. So it has to be very optimized. It has to run very smoothly, or else people will just be bogged down by whatever it is that you're presenting. So you want this balance of realism, but not too real, because then you get into the uncanny valley territory and you just end up like off-putting and disturbing people. But
You mean
you
like my
also
avatar right now?
a little bit,
Well,
maybe,
it's like we don't want to talk
perhaps.
about that, but whatever. Anyway, go ahead.
But stylized works very, very well in VR. I try to have sort of a stylization with all of my avatars. I've been told I do have a style, and I use that to my advantage in the creation of avatars, which start off as sketches and drawings, and work through the process of blocking out, sculpting in ZBrush, which is the main program that I use to get all of these beautiful organic forms and shapes. I then take that into either Maya or Blender or Cozy Blanket if I feel like doing stuff on the iPad on the couch, if I just can't sit at my desk anymore. And I retopologize all of that geometry. So I do all of the sculpting, and then I go and I do all of the retopologizing, which is basically taking single polygons and overlaying them on top of the sculpt that I've created, which is very, very high number of polygons, millions of polygons sometimes, and lowering it so that the entire avatar is sometimes under like 50,000 polygons, which is an incredibly low number of polygons for the detail in these avatars. I think the entire Wanderer avatar, with everything, the body, the mantle, the vines, the wings, everything, is about 120,000 polygons, which is quite good for what it is. It's certainly not a light avatar. It is an avatar meant for a performance, but it is very performant for what it is. And once that retopologizing is done, I bring it back into Substance Painter. I will hand paint the materials. I will do all of the bakes. So I'll take that really high poly model that I created, and I'll put it into Substance Painter underneath the low topology model. And what Substance Painter does is it projects all of that detail onto the lower poly model, so it looks like a really high poly model, but in reality it's just a map that is applied with a material, and you get that very high detail look on top of your very low poly mesh. And the key to getting a really nice model is you got to make sure that your silhouette is perfect. If your silhouette is perfect, The human eye and the human brain only sees basic shapes, really. It fills everything else in later on. And if your silhouette is correct and if your silhouette is perfect, it will look a lot nicer than if it is not.
That's a great tip. What's the example of a bad silhouette?
Well, a bad silhouette will not necessarily give the brain the right idea of what a shape is. If
Right.
you want people to recognize a shape, recognize what a thing is, the first thing that the brain sees is its outline, because it recognizes the empty space around that outline earlier than all of the detail inside.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want something to look like a thing in 3D but only use a handful of polygons, as long as the outline looks how it should, the brain will recognize it as such. So if the outline doesn't quite look right, the brain won't necessarily recognize it as that thing.
One more quick question about the technical stuff. People often think that it's poly counts that are going to be the problem, or that's why their files are so big, but it's always textures that eat up
Yes.
everything. And strangely enough, shaders are not nearly as expensive as textures are. So you can do a lot with material editing and the way that certain things have a sheen to them or a shine or they're duller. Talk just a little bit about that and how you deal with textures and physically based rendered materials and all that kind of stuff.
I will say that Resonite, in terms of shaders, is one of its weak points currently. It does not have custom shaders or anything like that, like VRChat does. Which is one of those things, but you can do a lot with what Resonite has, especially using certain tricks, like material layering, to layer materials on top of each other to get different visual effects. You can also use things very cleverly, like additives, to get different visual effects, masks. And of course, you can always edit things in a way where they move and they shift, and you can tweak those quite minutely to get different effects. There are some things that I definitely desire from custom shaders.
Of course, we always want something more.
Always want something more. But there hasn't been anything, like any particular thing in Resonite that I absolutely haven't been able to achieve without some sort of trick or some sort of, figuring it out another way. And oftentimes, while it's restrictive, sometimes restrictions foster more creativity.
Here. I agree. Yes, they're the mother of invention. I love, for example, the animation of your kerchief or scarf or whatever you'd
Thank
call
you.
it. How are you achieving that kind of fluidity?
Well, they are dynamic bones. So in the rig, the bones are rigged up to the cloth, and in here, what we have, actually, I actually have an inspector open because I have this I'm customizing my lighting, so I can dynamically do that. I have this little light spawned here, and I'm moving it around, so I can have this custom light and have my lighting the way that I want. But it's all controlled via these inspector panels, and they really they're literally really like Unity's control panel, except it's spawned in VR. And you can see that I'm grabbing it. I'm physically grabbing it and moving it around, and I can interact with it, dynamically. So if I spin my camera around just like this and put it behind me, I can show you that all of these controls are here, and I can, and this is control. This is all controls for the light, and all of these are different components. So this component is specifically for the lights. So I can go in here and I can just spawn a color picker and I can dynamically change the color of the light just as I'm standing here. And I can do, whatever I want with this lights, within reason. And with my scarf, what I can actually do is dynamically open up my avatar, and this is quite usual where you end up being in like an inspector forest, and it's just your natural habitats. I can actually open up my avatar in and of itself, go to my roughs, and show that this is the mesh render. This is the actual mesh. This is the material. Here's the list of bones. Here's a dynamic blend shape that I can drive if I want. That is essentially just moving the rough up and down. So if I wanted to dynamically drive this via this blend shape, I absolutely could. And then I have the armature, which is all of the bones in the avatar. So I can go to, let's see, where is it? It'll be the spine, chest, and rough. So here, I know it's a little hard to see because
By the way, this is called a diegetic interface. For those who aren't familiar with the term, that means that the interface is inside of the world and not laid over top.
POV. So it might be a little disorienting to see this way, but I'll try to keep my head level.
Sure.
So you can see here, this is a component that is a dynamic bone chain, and here I can control the bone chain that is connected to the rough here. So here's all the bones in the chain, and I can control how it looks from this component. So we've got the inertia force, damping, and whatever I do to change this in real time will change the appearance and how the rough actually moves. So if I change, like for example, the dampening, and I turn that all the way up, it will be a little bit more loose than if I turn the dampening down, and it will move like slower. So, or if I turn the elasticity down,
Oh,
it'll
cool
move
that you
like
can
really,
see.
really
Yeah,
slow.
that's
And
awesome.
you see it all in real time.
Yeah.
It's all in real time. And this is the magic of this platform. This is and it's really why I chose this platform to develop Liminal. And a lot of people, especially recently, there was a discussion in the Liminal Discord about why I chose this platform to develop Liminal, because they're like, well, you can achieve everything that you want in VR chat for Liminal, like visually and interactively and stuff like that. But I said but my reasoning is quite clear, and this was a discussion that I had with others even before the start of the development of Liminal, was what platform and why Resonite. And what I just showed you is exactly why. It is the core of what makes Liminal what it is, and what Liminal represents is that dynamic live creation, that dynamic live thought creation in real time.
The dream.
Right.
The
exactly.
holodeck.
Exactly. The holodeck. So I can go into my inventory. I have an inventory in Resonite. I can go into my inventory and I can, I'm like, I want a rubber ducky.
Oh, it's like
I
the
just want a
tickle
rubber
trunk.
ducky.
Mr. Dress-Up's tickle trunk.
Exactly. And suddenly, boom, I have a rubber ducky. It is manifestation. It is live manifestation, representation. And that is why I chose this platform for Liminal, because Liminal can exist in its purest form on this platform.
And I think it's also worth noting that this is a sort of generation, like almost like generation 4 iteration on this idea, right? You had like Second Life and World of Warcraft and Red versus Blue.
Yes.
And then we went into the era of alt spaces, and then you had Neos, which tried to be more dedicated to this kind of real-time performant high customization. And of course, a lot of platforms are just using like Ready Player Me and just implementing an API, but these other ones are really driven, like VR chat started to emerge more and more and more as a bespoke development platform. But this is really the post Neos, I mean, I should say that delicately, but era where everything that we wanted was now implemented from the ground up. And so this is really like the state of the art as far as where we're at.
Absolutely. And I mean, who knows, like maybe there will be a platform in the future that does this better. But currently Resonite is cutting edge. It is where we're at the moment. Custom shaders or no, it is, if you want to create in VR and if you want to create in a group socially, this is where it's at. Because while I'm, manifesting this rubber ducky, everyone around me, if I had people in here with me, can also see this rubber ducky and interact with this rubber ducky and edit this rubber ducky. And that is the beauty of this platform.
People take for granted the difficulty that we used to have of one person handing another person a rubber ducky.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Now you can, you can create as many rubber duckies as you want. Like it's totally great. Everyone could have a rubber ducky if they wanted.
I mean, just the thing in VR of like, are you in the correct position? Is your hand in the hand bone in the correct spot to grab it? Can we pass that inheritance of one person to another having control of this instance of the object? These are all things that used to be much rougher and have been iterated on so that it now just seems seamless, but it's not nothing to be able to do that.
Exactly. And in Resonite, you can do all of that dynamically. It's... we joke a lot around here where it's like, well, of course, if we have a stupid idea, we're going to implement it, an hour later. Definitely the most creative and funny and amusing things were silly ideas that were implemented in like an hour and elaborated on. And the quickness and rapidity of how things are developed in Resonite and the social aspect of it is very important. That group creation, which at some point I will go full bar into promoting Creator Jam, which is a nonprofit that I sit on the board of directors for, and it is a group that gathers every weekend here in Resonate. Currently, it is a metaverse-wide nonprofit, but Resonate is currently the best platform for it that we feel. And we basically come together every weekend and we build to a theme, and we basically create a world every weekend.
That's an amazing way to learn, and that sort of collaboration is so important, because one of the biggest concerns is that we get into our little silos and we try to build our way to better, but really benefiting from mistakes and happy accidents and collisions of ideas is where so much innovation can occur.
Absolutely. We just finished up actually the Halloween world for this weekend, as this weekend is our Halloween party. Yay. Which anyone attending FIVARS is absolutely welcome to attend if you have the inclination to. It is a really good world. We've worked very hard on it. I actually I led the creative direction on the world this year, and we're pretty proud of it. We're wondering, we're probably we're thinking that people people will come in and maybe think we might have some issues, some psychological issues, because it's quite good. It's quite a good world.
In
Quite
the
spooky
terms
and
of it being scary, or
Yes,
yeah?
in terms of it being scary.
Oh, good.
But that was but the world that we built for Halloween this year was an iteration of a Creator Jam world for a themed event, that we looked around and went, hey, this is our Halloween world. Let's do it.
That's fun.
Let's build up on this.
Plus, when
and
you have
let's
live
iterate on
performers,
this.
it's like one of those like haunted hay rides, because it's not just a bunch of animatronics. You have that real
Well,
interactivity, right?
We did do that last year. We did do that last year. We are not doing that this year.
Okay.
Because everyone's extremely busy and stuff. But the setting that we've developed does have lore to it and a story.
Oh, wow.
And there's a lot of visual environmental storytelling and a town that you can actually explore. And
Fun.
points of interest and things that you can look at, and the environment does tell a story. So I definitely encourage participating in that if you have the time.
Well, especially what's cool is that not everybody in the world has Halloween the way that we do in North America.
Yes, absolutely.
There's people who are like, what do? You dress up like ghouls and ask neighbors for candy? So yeah, it'll be fun to, for the international audience that joins FIVARS to be able to experience some of this manifestation of this holiday, which is my favorite holiday by far. And it's also, in the real world, in the meet space world, it's one of the last great places where neighbors actually come out of their houses and meet each other and interact.
Exactly. And in terms of the international audience, we have an extremely strong international audience here in Resonite. I actually think that the international audience is stronger than the American audience in Resonite, especially the Japanese and Korean communities. Extremely strong in Resonite. Very, very strong, very powerful groups, especially in terms of the things that they develop and the things that they create. And some of the best stuff I've seen, hands down, has come out of the JP community and the international communities. One of the artists actually features one of their wonders here in Liminal is actually a member of the JP community named Torazo. Torazo-san. She does these incredible sort of tilt brush stroke art pieces, which is something that you can dynamically do in Resonite, and you can actually save your work in Resonite.
Wow,
so you can
cool.
you can draw and then pick it up and move it around and save it to your inventory and keep it for later. And she works with Gunberry. She works Trazo and Gunberry. They did Tales of the Mystic Cat, which showed at Rain Dance this year along with Liminal, and it was a thing where they actually did a live performance where they actually painted for the audience an entire scene from the story that they had created and drawn and painted and created entirely in Resonite, entirely on platform.
The next thing I want is to 3D print the output of that show, so I can have a
that would be really cool. If you could do that, that would be really neat.
I've been 3D printing crazy lately with my bamboo printer, which is really the next, in the same way that Resonite is the next generation. The bamboo printers sort of took the best of everything that we had learned, and they've miniaturized into this really smart robot that's pulling off insane things very quickly. So these, even though 3D printing used to be much more popular than it is now, I think soon enough everybody will have one in their own home, and we'll be able to have this transfer of artifacts from the virtual worlds that we inhabit. And just the sheer expressivity that you're evolving is going to be such an important part of it too. Like, you can see that my avatar is definitely like a COVID era thing where I have a hard time even nodding my head and my mouth looks super weird, but you're already showing the nuance of the way your ears wiggle and your eyes and your mouth and your hands. And once we start to bring more photogrammetry and volumetric stuff and and GANs and everything else that's going to come into it, it's going to be a pretty interesting thing. And folks like you who have really been leading the charge are going to be the ones that we learn from. It's the artists that are needed. And that's why we run this festival, because you need those artists to sort of indicate to the technologists, like, okay, that's cool, but how is it going to permute like into a, an expressive medium?
Absolutely. And I am utilizing several sort of technological components to achieve the amount of expression that I have. I actually do not have eye tracking. I'm partially puppeting and with my hands, and I'm partially puppeting with my mouth, because I do have face tracking. Like, I do have mouth tracking. So when I create certain facial expressions, it moves different parts of my face, and when I press buttons, like I have on the index there's a touchpad, and you can actually map out a clamp as to how much pressure, if you apply a certain amount of pressure to the touchpad, it can move blend shapes to a degree. So that's what I'm using to blink my eyes.
Oh, so cool.
There is an actual eye manager on the avatar that blinks at intervals, but to do the more expressive, like, I'm closing my eyes now, I'm actually puppeteering that, as well as like the scowl and stuff like that. So certain expressions I control just with my mouth, but there are a couple I do control with my hand.
And that really is something that helps folks to appreciate the level of artistry and practice that is involved here. That it's not just a performance, but it's an evolved skill set that takes practice and nuance. We don't have a lot of time, so I want to pivot to one other topic, which is, by bringing folks into the show, what have you learned? What have you discovered that surprised you, that evolved the show in new directions?
I can definitely tell you what surprised me. And what really surprised me about people coming into the show is, when you go into social VR worlds, it's very interesting how people act in VR. And a lot of the time people are very crass.
Really?
They're very like, especially if you go into public worlds, and especially like in VR chat or Rec Room or any of these things, especially if there's like younger people or kids or stuff like that, it's usually very loud, it's usually very chaotic, it's usually very like people are there's like a sense of anonymity.
Yeah, and there's that whole act with impunity thing going on.
Right. Act of impunity. And while Resonite, it may just be that Resonite has a smaller population in general than VR chat, active populace than some of these social VR worlds, but something that really blew me away in terms of all of the attendance that I've had, and everyone that has attended Liminal, everyone has had extreme respect for the work. And that is something that has really blown me away, is that I have not had a single person come in here as of yet, and I've easily had like 150 people come through here at this point. It's every single person who's come through here has respected the work, and respected the work in a way that has been very moving to me. And while Liminal is definitely meant to stir up feelings like that, where it brings out a level of respect in people have been doing it just unprompted, just being in the space. And not only am I deeply appreciative of that, I think that it really speaks to how the future of VR will, integrate with society, and how people will respond to having these sort of higher level experiences in VR.
You've also created a kind of space of reverence and mysticism and wonder, and provided context, right? Given a lack of structure or objective or motivation or other things, people might just sort of be like, let's just make up our own fun. And that might be mischief or causing trouble. I think in games, often what people find in playtesting is that the first thing a person does is figure out how do they break stuff, because they're trying to understand the rules of the universe. So they're like, how do I die? Can I jump? Can I jump off a cliff? Can I beat things? And that is really just sort of testing your space, which of course has gone wildly amok in places like Rec Room and VR Chat. But you're here providing, as I've already said, a sense of sort of almost ritualistic entrance into another dimension that we want to learn about.
Yes, and that is the point of the piece. And not only do they show respect for the work, they show respect for each other, and that is almost more important than respect for the space that they're in. Is that they approach each other with kindness and respect and a want to interact. Because when you enter Liminal, you enter this enormous space, and oftentimes you end up just being alone. And that's the point. You're supposed to be wandering alone until you're not. Until you find someone and someone to connect with, whether or not that is the wanderer himself or another person that you've found that has been through the world before. Because we part of the point of Liminal is to return to it. You're supposed to come back. You're supposed to experience new shows because it's different every time. So you come back, and as a person who's been to Liminal before and been to this world and has been to this dimension, part of sort of the experience and part of the experiment is seeing how people communicate what to do in this world to new people who have never been here before.
Cool. I love that. So there's a sort of a passed on lore that exists. Yeah, that's another thing. I've been playing some pretty complex board games, and the richness that you gain from the 5th or 6th playthrough is so much different than the initial 2 or 3 where you're just figuring out all the rules.
Absolutely. And it is very different to come into this space a 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th time, because you will always see something new. You will always discover something new. And because the Wanderer is myself, because the Wanderer is a live actor and you can interact with him, asking him questions is the best way to get information. So the more you put into it, just like life and just like interacting with the universe itself, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get back.
Amazing. Well, this has been a very insightful tour that gives us an appreciation for just a bit of the work that goes into this. And everyone at the festival has come out gobsmacked and inspired. So thank you for the dedication that you have given to this. It can sometimes feel existential on the frontier. You feel like, wow, where is everybody? But that's just because you're way ahead of the pack. So
and that's why I'm here.
Congratulations to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.